19 terrorists affiliated with the Islamic extremist organization al-Qaeda hijacked 4 aircraft on September 11, 2001, and used them to launch suicide attacks against American objectives. 2 of the aircraft fell into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in New York City, 1 into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, not far from Washington, D.C., and 1 into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, which claimed over 3,000 lives, led to significant American counterterrorism programs and helped define George W. Bush's administration. An American Airlines Boeing 767 carrying 20,000 gallons of jet fuel smashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City at 8:45 a.m. on September 11, 2001, a clear Tuesday morning. Near the 80th level of the 110-story tower, a huge, smoldering hole was left by the collision, instantaneously killing hundreds of people and trapping hundreds more in upper stories. Television cameras transmitted live footage of what at first glance looked to be a strange event as the evacuation of the tower and its twin got underway. A second Boeing 767, United Airlines Flight 175, then descended from the sky 18 minutes after the first jet struck, made a fast turn toward the World Trade Center, and crashed into the South Tower not far from the 60th level. The collision set off a huge explosion that sent flaming debris onto the streets below and over the nearby buildings. It became evident right away that America was being attacked. The hijackers were Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and several other Arab nations. Reportedly financed by the al-Qaeda terrorist organization of Saudi fugitive Osama bin Laden, they were allegedly acting in retaliation for America's support of Israel, its involvement in the Persian Gulf War and its continued military presence in the Middle East. Some of the terrorists had lived in the United States for more than a year and had taken flying lessons at American commercial flight schools. Others had slipped into the country in the months before September 11 and acted as the muscle in the operation, at 3 East Coast airports: Logan International Airport in Boston, Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C., and Newark International Airport in New Jersey. The 19 terrorists had no trouble getting past security with box cutters and knives. They then boarded 4 early morning flights to California, which they did because the aircraft were well fueled for the protracted transcontinental flight. Shortly after departure, the terrorists hijacked the 4 aircraft, grabbed the controls, and turned them into guided missiles. American Airlines Flight 77 flew above downtown Washington, D.C., while millions watched the events in New York, before colliding with the Pentagon's west side at 9:45 a.m. The massive concrete structure housing the U.S. Department of Defense's headquarters suffered a structural collapse as a result of a terrible conflagration brought on by jet fuel from the Boeing 757. At total, 125 military members, civilians, and the 64 passengers on the airplane perished in the Pentagon. The South Tower of the World Trade Center fell in a huge cloud of dust and smoke less than 15 minutes after terrorists attacked the nerve center of the U.S. military, drastically changing the carnage in New York. The skyscraper's structural steel, which was intended to resist winds of more than 200 miles per hour and a sizable conventional fire, was unable to endure the intense heat produced by the burning jet fuel. The Twin Towers North building fell about 10:30 in the morning. When the World Trade Center buildings collapsed, just 6 individuals inside survived. Nearly 10,000 additional people had injuries, many of them serious. Airliner 93. In the meanwhile, United Flight 93, a 4th aircraft with a destination of California, was hijacked about 40 minutes after taking off from Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. The passengers on board were informed of the events in New York and Washington by mobile phone and airphone calls to the ground since the jet had been delayed in taking off. A group of passengers and flight attendants organized an uprising after learning that the aircraft was not landing at an airport as the hijackers had indicated. Thomas Burnett Jr., one of the travelers, informed his wife over the phone, "I know we're all going to die. There are 3 of us who are going to take action. Honey, I adore you." Todd Beamer, a different passenger, was overheard asking, "Are you guys ready? Let's roll through a free space." Flight attendant Sandy Bradshaw contacted her husband and admitted to sneaking into the galley and filled pitchers with hot water. "Everyone is hurrying to first class," she said to him in her final remarks. "I must leave. Bye." The 4 hijackers were beaten off by the passengers, who were also accused of using a fire extinguisher to attack the cockpit. The aircraft subsequently overturned and descended at a speed of more than 500 miles per hour, falling around 10:10 a.m. in a rural field close to Shanksville in western Pennsylvania. The whole crew of 44 perished. The White House, the U.S. Capitol, Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland, or any of the nuclear power stations along the eastern seaboard have all been suggested as potential targets. The 19 terrorist hijackers on board the 4 airplanes were among the 2,996 fatalities from the 9/11 attacks. In New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., people from 78 different nationalities lost their lives. After the 2 aircraft collided with the twin buildings of the World Trade Center, 2,763 people perished. 343 firemen and paramedics, 23 New York City police officers, and 37 Port Authority police officers are included in this total. They were working to evacuate the towers and save the office employees who were trapped on upper levels. 189 people died in the Pentagon, including 64 aboard American Airlines Flight 77, the plane that crashed into the structure. 44 persons lost their lives when Flight 93 crash-landed in Pennsylvania. President George W. Bush, who had spent the day being shuttled about the nation due to security concerns and was in Florida at the time of the attacks, arrived back at the White House around 7 p.m. "Terrorist assaults can rock the foundations of our tallest buildings, but they cannot touch the basis of America," he said in a televised speech at 9 o'clock. "These actions fracture steel, but the steel of American determination is unbreakable." He said, "We will not make a distinction between the terrorists who did these actions and those who harbor them, in regard to the inevitable U.S. military response." On October 7, Operation Enduring Freedom, an international initiative spearheaded by the United States and aimed at ousting the Taliban government in Afghanistan and destroying Osama bin Laden's terrorist network there, got underway. The Taliban were essentially driven out of operational control by American forces in less than 2 months, but the conflict went on as American and coalition forces battled a Taliban insurgent campaign centered in Pakistan's border. The architect of the September 11 attacks, Osama bin Laden, eluded capture until May 2, 2011, when American forces eventually located and killed him in a bunker in Abbottabad, Pakistan. It took until August 2021 for all American soldiers to leave Afghanistan after then-President Barack Obama announced the start of a significant military reduction. The Department of Homeland Security was established by the Homeland Security Act of 2002 in response to the security concerns sparked by 9/11 and the mailing of anthrax-laced letters that killed 2 people and sickened 17. On November 25, 2002, President George W. Bush signed it into law. In the modern world, the Department of Homeland Security is a cabinet in charge of border security, immigration and customs, as well as disaster relief and prevention. The National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States was established 2 days after the act. The goal of the politically neutral 9/11 Commission, as it became known, was to look at the circumstances leading up to September 11. On July 22, 2004, the 9/11 Commission report was made public. It referred to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the chief architect of the 9/11 attacks, the alleged mastermind of the 9/11 atrocities. From 1999 through 2001, Mohammed was in charge of al-Qaeda's publicity efforts. He was apprehended on March 1, 2003, by the CIA and Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence. He was questioned before being detained at the Guantanamo Bay detention facility alongside 4 other alleged terrorists accused of war crimes linked to the 9/11 attacks. International media attention has been drawn to the use of torture, including waterboarding, during Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's questioning. Mohammed and the other 4 men accused of planning the 9/11 terrorist attacks were given a trial date in August 2019 by a U.S. military judge in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The trial date was later delayed because of the COVID-19 epidemic. The U.S. economy suffered immediately as a result of the 9/11 attacks. During the assaults, several Wall Street institutions were evacuated, including the New York Stock Exchange. The market dropped 684 points, or 7.1%, on the first day of trade after the assaults. In the first 3 months, New York City's economy alone shed 143,000 jobs each month and $2.8 billion in compensation. 60% of lost employment were in the financial and aviation industries, which suffered the worst losses. The damage to the World Trade Center is believed to have cost $60 billion. Cleaning up the trash at Ground Zero cost $750 million. As the buildings burned and fell, thousands of first responders, residents, and workers in Lower Manhattan near Ground Zero were exposed to poisonous gases and debris. 10,000 persons have cancer diagnoses connected to 9/11 by 2018. More than $7 billion in compensation was granted to the 2,680 victims of the 9/11 attacks and their families between 2001 and 2004. When President Barack Obama signed the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act into law on January 2, 2011, funding was once again authorized. The bill preserved health monitoring and pay for 9/11 first responders and was named for James Zadroga, a New York City police officer who passed away from a respiratory condition he got after pulling people from the wreckage at Ground Zero. The financing for illnesses connected to 9/11 was extended in 2015 for a further 5 years at a cost of $7.4 billion. In December 2020, the Victim Compensation Fund was supposed to stop taking claims. A statute enabling financing for the September 11 Victim Compensation Fund through 2092 was signed by the then President Trump on July 29, 2019. Previously, once the $7.4 billion fund ran out, administrators had to reduce payouts by up to 70%. John Stewart, 9/11 first responder John Fiel, and 9/11 responder and former New York Police Department Detective Luis Alvarez, who passed away from cancer 18 days after testifying before Congress, were vocal supporters of the fund. Congress agreed to designate September 11 as Patriot Day on December 18, 2001, to mark the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The National Day of Service and Remembrance was established by Congress in 2009 on September 11. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, candlelight vigils and floral tributes were held in American embassies all around the world as the first September 11 monuments. At the Buckingham Palace changing of the guard, Queen Elizabeth of Great Britain sung the American song. Billboards in Rio de Janeiro depict the city's Christ the Redeemer monument hugging the skyline of New York City. 2 brilliant columns of light were sent into the air from the site of the Twin Towers on the first anniversary of the attacks in New York City in 2002. Afterward, the tribute and light installation was maintained annually by the Municipal Art Society of New York. The beams may be seen from more than 60 miles distant on clear nights. To choose a fitting long-term tribute to the 9/11 victims, a World Trade Center site memorial competition was launched. Reflecting absence, the winning design by Michael Arad is presently located in an 8-acre park outside the museum. Where the Twin Towers previously climbed into the sky, there are now 2 waterfalls and reflecting pools. The 152 bronze panels that surround the pools have the names of all 2,983 victims etched on them, organized according to each person's location on the day of the attacks so that employees and passengers from the same aircraft are remembered together. On September 11, 2011, the webpage was made public to mark the 10th anniversary of 9/11. On the original site of the World Trade Center, the National September 11th Memorial and Museum opened in May 2014. On the original World Trade Center site, the Freedom Tower debuted in November 2014.